So this is our first office hours session for critical reasoning. In the office hours sessions, we are going to basically spend time on revisiting concepts. I will try to bring a fresh perspective to them. I will try to uh, renew, refresh, and revise the concepts that are most important for your exam through different methods, whatever clicks, whatever way you are able to understand. So this session today again is going to help you with your reading, help you become confident with your reading, and give you an insight into what you are reading so that you can identify the main idea correctly, so that you are not still struggling with what is the conclusion, which part of the argument is the most important or the ultimate part that I have to know, right? So let's move into the lecture today and quickly go over the argument. An argument is basically, again, just a fresh perspective, a fresh definition, moving forward. So in the most philosophical sense, it is a series of assertions. This is what you are reading in your mocks. So I have redefined it to what you are likely to find. Basically, a series of statements, assertions, propositions that you are reading to demonstrate that a certain claim is true. So that means my ultimate job is to separate these assertions, separate these propositions, and see which claim they are supporting or which claim they are saying is true. So the structuring is either the author will support this claim through an explanation or some kind of reasoning. So an argument is a unit of reasoning that attempts to prove that a certain idea is true by citing other ideas as evidence. So let's spend time on the last part here, where to prove a certain idea, other ideas are cited. So let's try to visualize what we are reading through this, right? That means one idea as supported by other ideas, right, everyone? So if we move on, the idea that we try to prove true is called the ultimate conclusion or the conclusion or the thesis, whatever. All right. So we are in passage-based reasoning looking at this, the ultimate conclusion, main point or main idea. So any argument as the basic structure that you have done will be composed of the following. You know this, so I'm going to go over this quickly. You will have supporting premises. You will have a turnstile is nothing but an indicator. You have done indicators. So there are two ideas that are joined by indicators. So idea 1 plus idea 2, as many, leading to the ultimate conclusion. And this leading to is known as the turnstile or the indicator. This indicator will help you reach this ultimate conclusion. Just remember, these are the only parts you will read in conclusion, in arguments. If any part is missing, except the turnstile is only a facilitator to reach the conclusion. If any part is missing over here, then you are just reading one idea, which could be a belief, an advice, an explanation, or just a fact, but not an argument. So we all know that the argument has to be something of this nature, where one or two things lead to the final thing. So this leading to conclusion is the important bit that you all know the two parts are important, and in between the switch, when the idea stops being premise and then you lead to the last idea, which is the conclusion, is the turnstile. Turnstile is nothing but the indicators that we read. So I'm going to show you how it is. So what is the premise? It is a proposition which gives the reasons and the grounds for accepting the conclusion. We all know that, right? The turnstile is nothing but phrases like because, thus, therefore, that help us reach the conclusion. These we call as indicator words, and they help see the change between premise and conclusion. And naturally, the final outcome of the premises is the conclusion. So this is good for everyone. So at any point in time, whether you are reading passages or small paragraphs, you are reading this. So internally, how is this argument structured? Any idea that an argument wants to prove, which we call as the ultimate conclusion, are related to each other through a precise structure. This structure we study in the class on method of reasoning. You get some questions which ask you how is the argument structured, or what is the role played by this sentence, what is the role played by that sentence. And even if such a question is not asked, this basic structure has to play in your head for you to reach the ultimate or the main conclusion, whether you call it main or ultimate. And invariably, you are going over this structure, and if there is a clarity of the structure, for you reaching the conclusion, reaching the final argument becomes extremely easy. So this precise internal structure can be looked at in three basic patterns. So the first pattern is the inference-based pattern. This inference-based pattern says that the argument follows something of this outcome where you have X leading to Y and then Y leading to Z. And if Z is the main conclusion, then there is this intermediary between X and Z. So what is this intermediary? What is the role of this intermediary? And am I thinking, this is my conclusion? So whenever such a structure is followed, what happens is that you start getting confused which one is the final conclusion. What is it? Because it appears that if I break this up, then Y is a conclusion in between. And yes, many of you have given me correct answers. That is this an intermediate conclusion? Yes, that is what it is. So this Z, Y, is a sub-conclusion or an intermediate conclusion. And what is aspired by this Y? So I have to learn to catch this. So if I further spend time on this, so the inference is the connection that holds a set of ideas between reason and conclusion. Let's call it R and C. So R, if we take to be a fact or a premise, and it has to lead to C. Between R and C, this inference thing features, and either by saying that R leads to, so here R is X and C is Z. So if R is X and C is Z, so what is the role of Y? So if the author is trying to explain that X first leads to Y and this Y leads to Z, that means between X and Z, this bridge has to be created. Now, this inference can manifest itself like an assumption, and it can feature as an assumption answer, or it can be a sub-conclusion or intermediate conclusion. So if it is written, it becomes the sub-conclusion. If it is not written, then it becomes the assumption. If it is written, it becomes the subconclusion. If it is not written, then it becomes the subconclusion. So this is what I just told you, X to Y and then from Y to Z. So that means there is a relationship between X and Y and there is a relationship between Y and Z. This we work with the means of a bridge assumption. If it is not given, so अगर argument कहता X leads to Z, when Y is supposed to be a necessary intermediary conclusion in it, then a bridge assumption question would have arisen. This bridge assumption would mean that there is something in X and there is something in Y which is not connecting directly. From the keywords of X and Z, we would have found an option called Y from 4 options, and we would have shown a connection between this and then finally this and the bridge. This is a scenario when it is not written. But when it is written, this becomes a necessary intermediary step and hence it is an intermediate conclusion. So such an argument can manifest itself like this. Y because of X, hence Z. So when we have intermediary conclusions, it is not unusual to find both premise indicators as well as conclusion indicators in our answers. So Y because of X naturally and therefore Z, or Z after all X hence Y. So we have to put all three together. So this is what the sentence would look like or feel like, where we are trying to say that because X leads to Y, finally after all hence or it follows Z. And you have read such arguments where hence is supporting some intermediary or immediate conclusion, and finally we are reaching a ultimate or main conclusion. We have done these kind of questions and read these kind of arguments. So you can see two sets of indicator words, one which pushes the main conclusion forward and one which explains the relationship between X and Y. So it is not unusual to find two sets of indicators, and we have to remember that it does not mean there are two different conclusions, but the fact that the final conclusion is coming out because of the inference in between or the connection or the line of reasoning. That means this flow X to Y and Y to Z, this flow is necessary to understand the relationship between X and Z. So either this is the immediate reason, a sub-conclusion is also a reason, you remember, or this connection makes it an intermediary step. So a step or reason that finally leads to Z or the final conclusion. So that means between X and Y also a connector word or an indicator word will be given. So you should not feel that Y is the main conclusion. And together they would lead to Z. Nothing to worry here. We will do a question to understand this. So just a quick overview. Remember, whether an idea is a premise or a sub-conclusion, it depends on the relationship between two statements or three statements that come before the conclusion. If there is some kind of consequential relationship, then definitely premises lead to an intermediate conclusion and that leads to the final conclusion. So if there is a step-like feeling and if there is a feeling of one after the other, if there is a feeling of a chain while reading, you are reading sub-conclusions. Because some questions in 2020 that asked you to identify the role played by a sentence did have two options written as premise, sub-conclusion. So if you do get role played questions, then sub-conclusions feature as a word in an option. So now you know where this sub-conclusion fits in. Remember, premise is just looking at giving evidence. And I have told you, whatever premises are provided in your arguments, you have to take them to be true. So X in this case is a premise. A sub-conclusion is that intermediary step and it follows from the premise. So premise exists. We have to take the existence as a truth. From there, we lead to an intermediary statement called as the sub-conclusion. And this is midway between premise and the final conclusion, which is played by the letter Y in our diagram. So if we look at this argument and try to map it like the way I've shown you, will you be able to identify the conclusion, intermediary statement, and the premise? So will we have our X, Y, and Z here? Do you think you can be able to do it? You can put any letters A, B, C, X, Y, Z. So let's try and do that. So according to me, the main conclusion for this argument, one which is the final conclusion, for which other statements have given evidence, is this, which is given after therefore, isn't it? That anyone who says that they have got an eyewitness account of Mount Vesuvius is not true, right? So there was actually no written eyewitness account of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. So this is where it comes in, right? So this is our ultimate conclusion. And the direct support means the Y is this. This is like a sub-conclusion. Why not no one living at Mount Vesuvius? Yes, it is one of the conclusions, but it is an intermediary or sub-conclusion because it is leading to the final or ultimate conclusion. That's why we are doing this session, my dear. The final or the ultimate conclusion is whoever is saying that they have got a written eyewitness account is wrong. It is immediately dependent on line 1. No one could have survived it. So this is our Y and that was our Z. And this Y is based on another reason. And that reason is that the lava, yes, the last line is the main conclusion. So Y or B is based on C. So B is our Y and C is our X. That's where sub-conclusion and main conclusion confuse you. So you have to view it as the ultimate thing. This is the final line. Everything is supporting this line. This itself is not supporting any other line. This is the final thing the author wants to say. So why are there no eyewitness accounts? Because no one could have survived. Why could no one have survived? Yes, that is itself a conclusion. But it is based on the premise that the lava flows too fast. And no one can escape in time to actually give an eyewitness account. Yes, we'll do more questions, children. Right? So let's put our X and Y on the main argument. So this is our Y. This is our X. And this is our Z. So C is X, which is the premise. Remember, X leads to Y, leads to Z. So A is supported by B, B is supported by C. So B acts like your evidence for the main conclusion, but it itself is a conclusion for C. This is what we have explained, right? The lava was flowing too fast. Therefore, no one could have survived. Therefore, the account was not an eyewitness account. Now, do you understand, everyone? So, chain. It's like a chain. It should give a feeling like one thing following the other thing, following the other thing. So, all our passages that come in this format. Then we have another pattern for arguments, which looks like this. I'll show you the pattern, where the conclusion is formed of two sets of premises, but both of them have to be present together. Only one cannot lead us to the conclusion. So our premises are joined by the word and, or we can write furthermore or in addition to. These type of turnstiles or indicator words can be seen. So this only one may not lead us to the conclusion. Both together have to be present. You may have read some of these types of, and again, method of reasoning questions will further elaborate it, that the author is trying to say C, which are made up of P and Q. So we have to say P and Q, therefore R. Simple. Or and can also be changed to but. However, for the argument, the presence of both is needed to prove the conclusion. So that means this is the type of argument where either we are reading joint premises leading to conclusion, or the style of the argument is such, which again many of you, all of you would have read, not many of you, where the author has to first disprove P, then insert Q, and then say R. You have read it. Many people believe that ghosts exist. So this statement is actually necessary for R because the author has to first disprove it. So many people believe ghosts exist, but my experiences with the supernatural. Now, the author's experiences with the supernatural will not make an effect if the author does not insert P to first showcase a widespread belief. And you have read many types of arguments like this, where the author has to first disprove a point to establish credibility. So, when I say P and Q are needed, it means either both together or at least one of them has to be written, disproved, and then Q has to be written. The idea is one alone can do nothing. So they can be in a relationship of and, or they can be in a relationship of but. So dependent was both are together. Independent means both are good enough for the conclusion. It's not as if A needs B. But yes, the presence of B strengthens it. So when we do questions on strengthening, what we are trying to do is, in questions of strengthening, we are trying to provide one more reason. So this is independent reasons. So that means one is your inference pattern where there is a chain of reaction. And then you have these two other patterns which can connect two premises that are required to be present together, or they can connect as many premises that are needed to keep proving the conclusion, but not as if one is really needed for the other. Right? So independent and dependent reasons are clear to both of you. So you can quickly read it. And you can see independent reasons will have indicator words like, in addition to this, if this were not enough, this is also there. Or firstly, this is the reason, secondly, thirdly. So that there is a subtle change in indicator words from dependent reasons. There, both of them need to be present together, either in a like format or in a contradictory format. Here, you just keep adding things. So a strengthening statement would be one here. So strengthening can be of two types. If the strengthen is an assumption, so regular strengthen statements will be of this nature, where the author has written A and B. Now this, there is no plus sign here. Why? Because this is not together. A is also proving the conclusion, B is also proving, and you probably add a C to prove it. This is strengthen. But if the strengthen is doing the job of an assumption, then it is like this. Do you see this? If the strengthen is of the nature of the assumption, then this missing gap has to be filled. So you have to look for the why. Let's see a question now to understand this. So this is an example. So let's skip the combination and let me first show you. I'll come back to this question. So it's a combination, but it will help you understand independent. So just quickly read it and try to map it, and then we will see the map. That is correct. I'm getting the correct conclusions. This is the conclusion, everyone. And this conclusion is supported by this, which has led us to this. So do you think these two are related? So if we take this to be, let me do it with red. If we take this to be, let's say Z, right? Can this be Y and this be X? So if we say that X, Y, then finally Z, so X and Y are needed together, they are related, isn't it? Also, let's call it A, right? So Bob, and look at the premises and the fact that, and the fact means this is an additional premise. So we have Z, X, Y, A. So these two are independent. Those who wanted to understand what is independent, there is one logical coordination of X and Y. X leads to Y, or Y follows from X. A is additional, and we have got the conclusion. Do you understand this? So let's then go back to the combination thing. So what we have seen is that either ideas can be conjoined, dependent, or lead, one leading to other, leading to third, or independent. So what you're reading in a passage could very well be a combination of all these three, or it could just be this much, or it could just be this much. So the overwhelming data in the passage, rather than confusing you, should be helping you to map the final conclusion. But ultimately, the final conclusion will where all the ideas go in, right? So you can have two ideas put together with an and or with a but. The author can start with what everyone feels, then say, but this is not true. Then the author can give you one conjoined kind of an idea where the author shows you a flow chart. A leads to B, and finally B leads to C. Additionally, the author can give you more reasons. Then the output of these reasons can lead the author to make a final conclusion. So that means in a passage, everything could be at work. One paragraph is giving you dependent reasons, whether with and or with but. One paragraph showing you a flowchart and giving you a intermediary conclusion. Then certain independent reasons are also given in additional paragraphs. And finally, you are coming to the final conclusion. Could happen or could not happen. Tell me, children. Can happen, right? So every paragraph is behaving like this, but there is something which is out there. Now, I'm not saying that it is easy, but if you keep trying at it, if in your mind you look for that clarity, so it's not easy, it requires thought process. But look there, because other than what I've shown you in the mind map, there can be still some things that are not related to the final conclusion at all. You have seen many times, para 1 has got nothing to do with para 3 and passage begins from para 3. Would you agree? Para 1 is talking about something, but there is a huge twist. It could be analogy, it could just be a joke. Yes, sometimes, not always. So there may be ideas that have nothing to do, which you have to quickly recognize, but the ideas that have nothing to do, usually will come in the first para and finish off. And the biggest of it all, maybe you have just set of facts that help you reach a conclusion, and that conclusion is really unstated. You have to finally understand what the author is saying. The author is talking about spiders and candles and talking about something else, but behind it, there is a meaning to it, which is the conclusion. Possible? Tell me. So with the help of candles and spiders, you're trying to put together the logic. So the author is explaining logic using different things. And ultimately, you have the conclusion. And the biggest of it all, you may not have indicator words. That has happened, isn't it? Has happened or not? Indicator words are not given. You have to put the indicator words. So whether it is therefore or and but not be given. And additional reasons may also not have these words. Agree, everyone? But you have to find out, yes, this is an add-on reason, this is an additional reason. So when you are out there reading, more chances are that you will read a combination of all these types of argument structures, but these are the primary 99% cases falling into this kind of primary argument structures. And you may have all three structures in one passage, not in A-lit type of questions because they are on small paragraphs. So you're likely to find one, max two. But in Clat-like passages, because you're reading almost 400 words, you're likely to find all, or maybe just one also. But while you are doing it, now your mind is open and now you are more aware of what is happening. Now you know that I'm not going to get confused. There is a sub-conclusion, such a thing known as a sub-conclusion. So let me see what is the final line, which even the sub-conclusion is proving. So this will help you avoid those errors that are eating up your 4-5 marks here and there. And you are also aware that this exists, even though the expressions that I have shared with you are missing. Right? But you can still add the expressions yourself. So if we take one more question like this we have already done. Let's try and summarize it. Adrit, nothing is left in the 1%. That 1% could just be a story, a narrative passage, just story or just a description. Then it's not an argument. Okay, quickly conclusions and basic relationship of premises. So the first line, there is nothing wrong with prostitution, and you have two independent kind of reasons there, right? First is because there is nothing wrong with consensual sex and economic interaction. And second is that the author is explaining, they can be written independently, is taking an example of a blind date. So this example of a blind date is an illustration. Illustrations can be of two types. Illustration, more than trying to prove, tries to show. More than try to give a basic evidence, tries to just depict ये हो रहा है. So illustrations can be either direct examples or analogy examples. This is here as an analogy example. Agree, everyone? Many times illustrations are used as direct premises to support the conclusion, which is okay, but it is not the clear hardcore evidence that is needed. So in this case, there is nothing wrong with prostitution is based on another assertion of the author that there is nothing wrong with consensual sexual and economic interactions. So the author is using the second line after because as a principle. Is this principle written in law? We don't know. It could be the author's own belief and principle. Right? But this is serving to be the direct evidence, and an additional evidence, an independent one, is this analogy. Analogy is a part of illustration. Illustrations are of two types, examples and analogies. Moreover is additional premise, independent additional premise here. But within that, within the additional premise, moreover is not an indicator of an illustration. Inside the additional premise, the author has made use of an analogy. Final conclusion is given with, therefore, this is our final conclusion. Do you see a chain of if and outcome? Do you see this? X, Y, everyone? So this is the Y based on X. So there is X, Y, right? And this, let's call it A, or let's not call it X and Y. Let me call it something else. So this is a longish relationship. Let's do it like this. So this is A, which leads to B. Then this B leads to C. Can you see it? So A leads to B leads to C. Right? And there is an additional. So this is one box. In the second box, let's call it P. And both of these are leading to the main conclusion. This is the map you have got in your mind? Great. Let's just do one more. Yes, let's do this. Explain A, B, and C again. Okay, after this question, I'll go back to A, B, and C again. So this line, if we call it Y, this Y is dependent on X. This is a repetition of Y. This is a repetition of Y again till here. Right? So X leads to Y. This is the general principle. This is the general principle. Now, within the general principle, A has happened. A is Bob ate the crab. This is direct evidence. This direct evidence is leading to the main conclusion here on Bob. So the conclusion drawn is on Bob, but for that, a general conclusion has been made. So the final thing will be X leads to Y. Y is the intermediate conclusion. This intermediate conclusion helps to, so this is first part of the argument, and the second part is A leading to B. Now this is a scenario where the author has given a cause and effect. The effect is the intermediate conclusion, and this cause and effect is general rule. From this general rule, we lead to the specific cause and effect. So X mirrors Y and B mirrors, X mirrors A and B mirrors Y. But Y is not the main conclusion because the main conclusion drawn is on Bob. So he will also have stomach ache. This is B. B is the main conclusion. If you have understood this, these are very common in ALET and everywhere. Where you make a general rule, then you apply it to a specific case. You make a general rule and then you apply it to a specific case. General rule is whoever is eating the crab will be ill. Will be ill is the conclusion for the general rule. But that's not a final conclusion because we are now applying it to Bob's case. The main point here is on Bob. Will Bob be sick? Yes, he will be sick because he ate at the restaurant. Why will he be sick if he ate at the restaurant? Because of the general rule which the author has already established. Yes, so this is like parallel reasoning. So we have the argument divided into two parts, A leading to B. Why? Because X has led to Y. This is the question. Since is the premise and he will be sick is the conclusion. This question, let's quickly redo it. Israel is not safe is the final conclusion, right? So this is the main conclusion. Why is Israel not safe? Because if Iran gets the missiles, since Iran has threatened many times, so this is X, Iran has threatened, and if Iran gets the missiles, this is Y. Y is rewritten, it will be able to carry out the threat. This is, let's call it Z. So X leads to Y leads to Z. This is the line of thought. Iran has threatened, if it gets the nuclear vessels, it will carry out the threat. One line, reasons. Therefore, Israel is not safe. Main conclusion. And one additional reason is also given as A. There is no connection. Anyone who gets nuclear or uranium is not going to feel other countries feel safe. Have you got it? Great. So this was just a method for you to visualize statements, children. You can try to do it. Anyways, it makes a lot of sense for you to find out the main idea or main point or main conclusion. And that you have to do by seeing what is happening in the argument. What is supporting what? What is deduced from what? So read. Spend time reading. You have been given a study planner to follow. Sit and solve every day. And while solving, focus. This is the final conclusion. It is based on these few premises. Okay, these two premises are related together. This premise is separate. Just that's all what I have taught you today. But you have to sit down and spend time, at least half an hour on each reading section every day to be able to reuse what I have given here. This video will be available on your MyZone account like all videos are. It will be available on our YouTube channel. Go over it again if you found some problems in the first go. patiently open it again, go over it again. Sometimes it takes 2 viewings to start understanding. So we'll end it here now, children. Thank you very much.